Will the congregation please rise in body or spirit? And please be seated.
For me this side the ground, on this shining night, this shining The late year lies down the north, all is healed, all is health. High summer holds the earth, hearts all whole.
The late year lies down the north,
All is healed.
Summer holds the earth, hearts all whole.
Sure on this shining night, sure on this shining night, sure on this I weep for wandering far alone.
Thank you, Chrisanne and Shazor. It is a gift in Kay's memory to have such beautiful song. Good morning and welcome to this memorial hour. We gather here today at Unity Church-Unitarian and online in homes near and far. We gather for this time outside of time, made holy by our attention and our presence. By the presence of community gathered in person and online, and by the presence of grief and loss sitting side by side with love and life. We gather today to celebrate the life of Catherine Emkovik, known by some of you as Kathy, and by many of us here at Unity and beyond as Kay. And we mourn her death last October. And as I stand here with the Advent evergreens and all of these poinsettias, I can't help but think that Kay would have been pleased to have so much red here among us. She did love the color red. We gather in gratitude for the light Kay brought with her when she entered a room, for the love she shared so generously, and for the way both of these still shine among us. We gather today as one family, united by our loss, giving voice to our sorrow, finding comfort in one another, and giving shape to the farewell that now must finally be said. As we do, we unveil a deeper knowing that the spirit of life rings out, even in the silences of death. That love's embrace is larger than life and death both. That the seasons from which life springs circle over and over again, and that the heavy grief we feel today in time may grow into tomorrow's hope. The breath of life and love eternally renewed as we continue on, carrying those we have loved and lost with us for the rest of our days. I light the chalice now for this sacred gathering in time. Remembering Kay's bright light and honoring the beauty and the grace, the love of life and song and art so present in her life and still present in our own hearts today. Let us now kindle this light as we begin today's service. Chrisanne will lead us in hymn 203. In your gray hymnals, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky, a favorite of Kay's, I invite you to rise in body or spirit and to sing with our masks on.
We will sing verses 1, 2, and 3 today. Creatures of the earth and sky, come kindred, lift your voices high. Alleluia, alleluia. Bright burning sun with golden beam, soft shining moon with silver gleam. Alleluia, alleluia.
Please be seated. Friends, we have taken this time today to tend to the web of relationship, connecting us all. We step out of the tumbling stream of our lives and pause to make room for grief, to sit with it a while and let it wash over us and through us. I share these words from Melvin Kane. Give way to grief and unashamed, abandon stoic fortitude a while. Set free a while the soul, better to bear its load. Tears unshed are stones upon the heart that choke the healing stream. Unlock the floodgates, loose the waters, give way and cope with grief. Although we often hold grief at bay, it is grief that opens the way for us to learn from death the preciousness of life and the lasting nature of love that grows beyond it. Loss teaches us what it means to be alive, and just as love teaches us that letting go is the necessary requirement of carrying one so tenderly within our heart. And in these lessons, we experience the embrace of love, reaching out now and always to hold us, comfort us, even guide us when our loved ones are no longer physically at our side. In this and every loss, grief invites us to name and honor what was good and unique in our loved one, and to make room in our own lives to carry those values on, to live them out in the world as our true inheritance and as Kay's lasting legacy. I also want to name that new grief often awakens older grief. For losses of loved ones who died recently or long ago, as well as the sorrows present in this pandemic time. Do not be afraid of grief's return and lingering. Find your own ways of befriending it, and it will help you carry the sorrows of this time as well as your memories of Kay and other dear ones no longer with you. Grief can be a doorway to the continued loving presence of Kay and all our ancestors, whether they are ancestors by blood or ancestors by choice and relationship, those dear ones whose lives have illuminated and blessed our own. Please join me now for a moment of silence in tribute and in welcome to all our beloved ancestors waiting on the doorsteps of our hearts to join us on this day. And will you pray with me? Holy One, known by many names and beyond all naming, Spirit of life and love, shining on us all on this cold and snowy winter's day, we give thanks for the life of Kay Emkovik, for the love and beauty she brought to the world, and for her caring heart that embraced so many. As we celebrate the joy she radiated in this hour of homage and remembrance, let us not guard ourselves too firmly from our sorrow. Rather, we pray that our hearts, now opened by grief, might stay open, that Kay's gifts might find their place in our lives, that her love of art and culture, of people and animals, of justice and joy, will continue on in us. Open our hearts today and always to these and other cherished blessings that Kay shared in her caring and her being. May it be so, and amen. And Morgan Plichka will now deliver a remembrance.
I have often said that everyone should be lucky enough to have an Anifaf, but only a few of us actually are. Most of you here probably knew her as Catherine or Kathy or Kay, but to me and the rest of her nieces and nephews, she has always been Anifaf. No one quite seems to remember where the nickname came from or why it stuck, but it did, and now I can't call her anything else. I tried here, but it just didn't sound right, so I'm sticking with Anifaf. Sometimes just Faf, or as I especially like calling her in later years, the Faf, an honorary title which I envisioned written on a lit-up Hollywood-style marquee followed by an exclamation point, as in the Faf has arrived. And arrive she did. Inevitably very fashionably dressed and wearing a big smile and bright lipstick, full of enthusiasm, and always, always happy to see you, whoever you are. I learned many things from Faf in a half-century of knowing her. She did not try to teach me any of them. She simply demonstrated irresistibly how to live life with kindness, caring, and an open mind, and how to have quite a bit of fun along the way. It could be much longer, but for today, I've compiled a list of just 10 life lessons from Faf to remember. Some are bigger, some are smaller. They are in no order of importance. Number 1, if you can get it in any color, get it in red. Dresses, glasses, lipstick, shoes, walls, I will always associate Faf with the color red. It could be an orangey Russian red or a more pinkish fuchsia red, but in any event, it should be bold. Yellow is nice too, maybe even a cobalt blue, but bright red is fundamental. Number 2, embrace the things that the people you love, love. Faf's circle of family and friends was made up of an incredibly diverse group of people with widely varied interests. Hockey, fireworks, fashion, music, fine art, basketball, Russian language and culture, comedy, dance, politics, cooking. The list goes on and on. Some of these were passions of her own. Maybe you shared one or more. Maybe that's how you got to know one another. But that didn't matter much down the road, because if she loved you, and she loved you, and you were into it, whatever it was, she was going to be into it and support you 100%. If she could, she came to your performance or game or graduation, or at the very least studied up on it and asked you follow-up questions. no matter what it was or how esoteric or boring someone else might find it. She was going to be your fan. Three, embrace the people that you love. I have never known anyone to speak as frequently and highly of not only their own siblings, children, and respective offspring, but also their spouses, partners, extended families, and friends, as Pfaff did. The bar to entry to Pfaff's heart was not merely low, it was non-existent. If she loved you, and she loved you, she automatically also chose to love the people you picked. She did not discriminate. Anne Louise and John, my dad, you were as much her siblings as John are Martha, my mom, and Margaret. Lisa and Craig, you were bonus children that came with Scott and Caitlin, and she was deeply and unabashedly fond and proud of all of you. Her grandsons, Andy and Alex, nieces and nephews and great-nieces and nephews, our expanding families and friends of friends, her church family and dance family and lake neighbors and city neighbors, Johnny's students and foreign exchange student. She took us all in, as we were, no questions asked. What a rare and precious phenomenon that is. It is not one for the faint of heart. Number 4, cake is good, but frosting is better. Also, cotton candy, caramel rolls, marshmallow fluff, and Dr. Pepper. Best consumed in conspiracy with a fellow appreciator of the magic certain combinations of sugar and artificial coloring can bring. Sometimes actual children, always children at heart. No matter what, she always gave you the bigger half. Number 5, don't get bitter, get compassionate. Like all of our lives, Pfaff's was not without its difficulties and challenges. Growing up with a beloved sister whose life seemed so unfairly limited, only to ultimately be cut short. The adjustments of a young, unanticipated marriage and family life. The joy and pain of having a severely autistic child who, while deeply loved, seemingly couldn't be reached. I never once heard her complain about the circumstances life presented her with. And I don't mean that she lived in denial or soldiered through with white knuckles and a stiff upper lip. I mean that she used her experiences to grow an enormous, overarching empathy for all people. No, wait, make that creatures, because animals are definitely included, and to dig to find those sometimes elusive points of connection and understanding, even among the resistant. It was impossible to be excluded or overlooked in her presence. I am reminded of the quote from her fellow modern sage, Dear Abby, which was taped on her refrigerator door for many years and read, "The best index to a person's character is how he treats people who can't do him any good and how he treats people who can't fight back." I don't know how high Abigail Van Buren's index of character goes, but I know Catherine Emkovik scored at the very top of that scale. Number 6, document, document, document. I say this not in the context of legal precaution, but in the context of love. Pfaff was a notorious sender of cards and pictures. Her cards, sometimes beautiful works of art, sometimes, oftentimes loud. She did love to send those musical cards to play when you open them and sometimes just spontaneously on their own, were always meaningfully selected with the recipient and the occasion in mind. She also loved to take pictures, many of which were taken at odd angles or blurry and often not particularly flattering to their subjects. And she often gave them to others after a shared event. Those have become some of my very favorite photographs because they were taken through her eyes and show what she saw and how excited she was to be present with people she loved. Pfaff had many ways of remembering and honoring the people in her life. The cards and photos were some tangible ones. If you have some, hold on to them. You'll be glad you did. And if you don't, focus on a favorite image or two and create a mental picture, which leads me to her next lesson. Appreciate the moment as you are living in it. I learned relatively recently that Pfaff took mental pictures her whole life, even being able to recall 6 decades or so later, without having any photographic record, exactly what her children wore on their respective first days of kindergarten. When I asked her how on earth she could possibly remember that, she told me these were special moments that she recognized as they were happening. But if she didn't have a camera at the time, or even if she did, she still took a mental picture and filed it away. And she kept doing that her entire life. I am sure that you are in her album, as she is in yours. Number 8, do get mad, but also do something about it. There is no shortage of wrongs in this world, and Pfaff was acutely and fully aware of that. It can be so easy to get overwhelmed and paralyzed by all the injustice and cruelty if you're paying attention to it, which she did. What I so admired about Pfaff is that she always found something to do about her outrage, then actually did it. She was a lifelong advocate for women's rights, for the disabled, for Native Americans. It's pretty safe to say that if you are the underdog, she is going to be in your corner. She fully believed in civic participation and volunteered as an election poll worker for many years. I remember she once read an article about how sled dogs were abused then killed after enduring the legendary 1,000-mile-long Iditarod race across Alaska. Many of us probably read that same article, said that's terrible, and moved on with our day. Not Pfaff. By the very next day, she had written a detailed letter to the race sponsors explaining her objections to the treatment of sled dogs and even offering specific suggestions as to how they could make their practices more humane. I don't think she knew a lot about dog sledding or the history and politics of the Iditarod or Alaska, many thousands of miles away. I don't think she even particularly thought she would be listened to. But she saw wrong, and that's all she needed to speak up and take action. Number 9, don't grow up too much. Pfaff was an imp and a prankster who could both give and take a good practical joke. She could also appreciate and laugh at the good bad jokes, which I'm sure was a key to her almost 60-year-long marriage to her husband, my Uncle John. The bottom line, if there was mischief to be had, she wanted to be in on it. She may well have instigated it. It's part of why I think she appealed so much to children of all ages. For all her knowledge and talent and appreciation of fine art and design, she once confessed to me while looking at a finger painting that I think I might love kids' art the most of all. It's so genuine. See also the earlier lessons regarding noisy toys and consumption of sweet, sticky goodies. Number 10, you are wonderful. That's what Pfaff told me nearly every time I saw her. You, all of you, are wonderful too, or special, or awesome, or amazing, or a treasure. Pfaff had terms of affection and admiration for everyone in her life. The remarkable thing, perhaps especially for a lifelong Minnesotan, is that she actually said them to us, out loud, all the time, even in moments when we were not feeling like our most wonderful or amazing selves, perhaps especially at those times. I'm sure she didn't hear it back enough. Not all of us are built that way. I know she forgave us where we fell short, but let there be no doubt. Pfaff, you are wonderful and amazing. Our lives were changed for the better by the gift that was you. The Pfaff has not entirely left this world or any of us. She's here in red lipstick and kid art and animal shelters. She's reminding us to send that nice picture we took to that new person we met. They'll probably really appreciate it. And to plant some flowers and vote. At some point in the future, I will stumble across a ridiculous greeting card featuring a singing hamster or pop-up cartoon kittens or some such nonsense, and I will know that it is Faf who sent it to me. And I will smile, and I will laugh, and I will think of her. Oh, and she's sending one to you too. I hope and pray that her spirit is currently being welcomed into its next realm by a giant lit-up marquee announcing the Faf, also known as Catherine or Kathy or Kay, has arrived. Possibly one surrounded by cotton candy clouds, ideally with hordes of affectionate animals waiting in a greeting line. She deserves no less, and a whole lot more.
Thank you, Anne. A regular part of our memorial services here at Unity Church is to put out a call for remembrances from those who knew the one who has died. And this collage of voices that I am about to share, I am struck with the repeated themes of Kay's light and joy. This from Kathleen Radspinner. Kay was warm and kind, an effervescent spirit in the Unity Choir. I loved her bright colors and kind smile. Ruth Palmer, our former director of music here. I will always remember Kay arriving early for choir, especially in her red coat and hat. She always arrived with a warm greeting of, "Hi, Ruthie, anything I can do to help?" I was always grateful for that warmth and for her dedication and the special twinkle in her eyes. It reminded me that though we were brought together to sing, we were gathering to be in community and mutual support. Chuck Griggs writes this: I got to know Kay best the winter of 2019 when she was not comfortable driving at night anymore. I would frequently give her a ride to and from choir practice. We had many chats during those drives. She had a fascination for and interest in people of different backgrounds. And as her obituary points out, she was such an optimist. I would miss those visits in the car when the next year she decided she could not continue with choir. But after that, she was to me a light in the room when I would see her at church. Hal Freshley, whom I'm told she used to call Fresh Hal, writes this: after her husband John passed away, some folks in Unity's choir got together to coordinate rides for Kay to get her to choir practice, and I was part of that group. That's how I got to know her better. Over time, I began visiting her regularly with my dog Beecham in tow. She showered us both with affection and treats, and with good old-fashioned conversation. Gradually, I got to know about her past and her present. Her love of gardens and the environment, ice hockey, American Indians, traveling the world, her own mother's architectural skills, her children, and her beloved husband's athletic prowess. She was a brilliant and generous conversationalist. And how better to be an exemplary citizen of the world? Karen Buggs writes this: Kay was the classy, charming lady in red in the choir. Her birthday cakes and cinnamon buns matched her sweet smile and personality. And Mabbitt says, I remember Kay and her smile and beautiful red outfits, smiling in any direction as she sat opposite of me during choir practice. Roxy Johnson writes, Kay was a little sparrow of good tide. Her signature color was most definitely red. Kay sang in the choir for many years, and if she knew your birthday was coming up, she would bake something special for you. Shelley Butler writes, Kay often stopped me in the parish hall to tell me about the latest Kent Nurburn book so I could buy it for the library, or to ask me to sign up for Project Home, or to talk about submitting something to our Unity Church Journal of the Arts called Cairns. One Sunday in the fall of 2013, she told me about a poem she had written about a sacred place, what was left of an old Chippewa burial ground on Wisconsin Point at the tip of Lake Superior. U.S. Steel had forced people off their land over 100 years earlier and removed 200 graves. A dozen or so 2-foot-tall concrete blocks and a sign mark that spot today. I couldn't get her description and poem out of my mind, so I went there. The next Sunday, I stopped Kay in Parish Hall to tell her she had inspired me to go, and that I felt as she had, both the painful history and reverence for the site. She was surprised and joyful. I have visited that spot a few more times since, always grateful for Kay and her inspiring me to learn more about history, painful as it is, and to visit that sacred place. Kathy Seidels and Paul Gady write this. Friends would talk about how they got invited to a cabin up north and how much fun it was. Thanks to Kay and John Emkovik, that happened for us too. We had a great time fishing with John and hearing stories of putting on fireworks shows each summer from Kay. Kay was ahead of some of us in talking about Dr. Anton Troyer's books about Ojibwe history. She was a longtime participant with us in Afterthoughts each Sunday. She was, as usual, a great conversationalist and cooked for us when we had supper with her for the last time in May. She was a role model for how to age gracefully while keeping in touch with friends and doing what is meaningful. Linny Seams writes, Kay was quite a character. I would get a gentle touch on my arm and there she'd be, ready with a heartfelt comment. It might be a compliment about our lovely girls, how she enjoyed seeing my husband and me together at church, how moved she was by the women's ensemble that day, or how she appreciated what I had written in Karen's journal, and how she'd laughed at one of my pieces over and over. I loved her almost elfin or pixie-like sparkling eyes, full of mischief, looking right at me, making a connection. I will always remember her for her signature color lipstick, red. Linda Fay writes, Kay welcomed me cheerfully and made me feel at home during the first Unity coffee hour I ever attended. Our special greeting dance brightened my Sundays for years afterwards. I loved seeing her shine in choir and admired her ever-positive attitude even when life was tough. The planet has lost a life. I will miss you, Kay. And I close the collage with this beautiful tribute from Kay's brother-in-law, Jonathan Morgan, who called her by her given name, Catherine. Catherine was my sister-in-law for the more than 53 years I have been married to Catherine's wonderful younger sister, Martha. During this entire time, Catherine was a close and loving family member. I am grateful that she played a significant part in bringing her sister Martha and me together. Catherine was an inspirational light which will continue to shine forever. In her life, Catherine reminded me of Eleanor Roosevelt, who stated, I would rather light a candle than curse the darkness. She saw the needs in the community and beyond and took action to make the community and the world a better place. Catherine gave generously and abundantly to me and our part of the wider family. It could be a phone call, a note, or an illuminating story. She encouraged us in the taking of action to help others in need. She continually widened her circle of inclusion in bringing people together. Catherine blessed me and our family with good humor and entertained us with great food and stories and pictures of the Roloff family in which she and Martha had been born and raised. I will always remember Catherine with greatest respect and admiration. She was the best of the best. Her glass was overflowing. She was the embodiment of life filled with love, which she gave away with great abundance. Thank you, Catherine, and bless you. I share with you this reading that was among Kay's belongings gathered by her children after her death. After having named the importance of making room for our grief, this reading is her own reminder for us to also claim joy on this day. To those I love, if I should ever leave you whom I love to go along the silent way, grieve not, nor speak of me with tears, but laugh and talk of me as if I were beside you there. I'd come, could I but find a way. But would not tears and grief be barriers? And when you hear a song or see a bird I loved, please do not let the thought of me be sad, for I am loving you just as I always have. You were so good to me. There are so many things I wanted still to do, so many things to say to you. Remember that I did not fear. It was just leaving you that was so hard to face. We cannot see beyond, but this I know, I loved you so. 'Twas heaven here with you. Please rise in body or spirit to sing hymn number 16. 'Tis a gift to be simple, and we will sing it through twice.
Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn, will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn, will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
Please be seated. Catherine Emkovik, born as Catherine Roloff and known to many of us as Kay, was one classy woman who wore red perhaps better than anyone I have known, and who demonstrated in her being that the extraordinary light that shines when beauty is more than skin deep. Born to Clarence and Evelyn Roloff in Montevideo, she was the second of 4 children. Her father was a district judge and her mother an oil painter, together instilling her with a lifelong appreciation for both justice and beauty. She was especially close to her younger sister, Martha, who would often climb into bed with big sister Catherine. In summers, the family enjoyed time at Green Lake in Spicer, Minnesota, and in her teen years, Catherine kept busy at school, singing and baton twirling, gracefully leading the town parades. It may come as no surprise that she was popular with the boys. And already early on, very conscious of fashion. She was bold, too, in her senior year, taking her Raleigh bicycle on a trip to Nova Scotia. No small feat in any time. But remember, this was 1951, and she was a woman. After graduating from high school, she moved to Nevada, Missouri to attend Cotty College, a 2-year women's college where she studied the arts and music. After graduating, she took a job with Empire Producing Company based in Kansas City, Missouri, and traveled throughout the southeastern U.S., directing variety shows. She eventually had her own children's radio program called Kay's Corner on KDMA. It was during these years, while visiting her family, that she met her husband, John, a young social studies teacher living in a tourist cabin while beginning his lifelong career as a school teacher in Montevideo. Kay's sister, Martha, was a student of John's, and one day she forgot her lunch. And when Martha delivered it to the classroom, that's when she met John. John and Kay were in many ways different in personalities and interests, but Kay was taken by his young, athletic, and this good-looking man, and he with her, a bright, attractive, energetic young woman with a zest for life and the arts. They were married in 1956 and moved to the east side of St. Paul and had 3 children over the next 3 years. First Kate, then Andre, and finally Scott. John was teaching, and Kay was a full-time homemaker, a loving but not doting mother, I'm told, and not entirely interested in her domestic role, especially not cooking. But she was a great baker, known for her cinnamon rolls and Swedish tea ring pastry, perhaps motivated by her own sweet tooth that we've heard about. As one of you told me, her byline might have read, "Everything goes better with chocolate, caramel, and nuts." The same year Scott was born, Kay was thrilled when John's mother bought her a piano. As the children grew up, Kate, you've recalled that sometimes when your friends were over playing with you while your mom sang and played piano in the other room, they often thought it was a record. She was that good. In those early years, as her 3 children became more active, John and Kay came to realize that their middle child, Andre, suffered from severe disabilities. When he became a toddler, they could no longer meet his needs and moved him to a home in Brooklyn Park. Kay was heartbroken, and both she and John visited him often, although it was difficult to make a connection with him. In 1960, the family moved to South St. Paul and bought a cabin north of Brainerd where they spent their summers. They named it Andre's Wood to keep his spirit with them always. About that time, Kay joined a modern dance group that for several decades performed with jazz musicians at the downtown Y in St. Paul. In 1969, the family joined Unity Church. They chose it, as Kay reported, after the Presbyterian church they'd been attending refused to take a stand against the war. Here at Unity, as you've already heard, Kay became an active and much-loved choir member. At home, her dream of her own family gathering around the piano to sing wasn't one that John shared and did not materialize, but Kay found her singing family here. Kay's love of the arts and culture ran deep, not only for her appreciation of beauty, but as part of her understanding of what makes the world a better place. Among her papers found by her children after her death was a clipping of an article by Yo-Yo Ma in which he said this: "We are all cultural citizens, and culture will be the engine of our reconstruction as it always has been. Culture is the foundation on which we will build a world where we reaffirm our commitment to equality and safety for all. We act with empathy, and we know that we can always do better." It makes sense then that Kay was politically active, often writing to her representatives, and here at Unity volunteering for things like Project Home when the church became a shelter for families without homes. And over the years, she also developed an interest in justice for Indigenous people. You heard earlier a reference to the sacred place near Lake Superior where she'd left a poem she'd written. The poem was published in our church's annual arts journal, along with her description of the place where she put it, protected in plastic and attached to a tree stump. Here is her poem. "Sunrise and sunset between the trees so old, in my heart I love it so. I drink in the colors, soft and bold. Fortune has enveloped my culture at the expense of Native people. My people sometimes think we own it all, but truth, no one owns it all. Who is worthy of this land which my ancestors stole away? Under the same sky we should kneel and pray, respect the seasons of Native people, and on the land on which they died, remember what their cost." Kay's caring for others was personal as well as political. As you've heard, she was quick to write cards, find the perfect gift, or bake the most welcome treat. She was generous with those she loved, and she loved many. Kay's beloved John died in 2015, and she did what she could to remain independent after that. About 4 years ago, still driving, she hit a boulder in Pine River and at first didn't tell anyone, instead purchasing a new car, same make, model, and color. Later, she acknowledged that she had bumped into a rock, as she put it. But the tow truck driver had a different story, revealing that they had found her car on top of a boulder. She was independent. But in time, she accepted rides from others and had help coming to the house so she could remain at home. And there she remained until a few weeks before she died, when she fell and wasn't able to call for help. She was admitted to the hospital, then to rehab, and then back to the hospital with an infection. Kate came from California several times in those final weeks, and Scott and Martha were frequently at her side. It was there in the hospital that she passed away with her beloved family around her and her light shining on in each one of them as it shines in each of us who knew and loved her. May we each now do our part to keep that light shining in our hearts. May we cherish, as Kay did, the sweetness and beauty of life, and may we share these gifts as generously as Kay did. Blessed be, and amen. Our closing song will be provided by two friends and two family members.
Was there while the blackbird was joyfully singing, I first met my dear one, the joy of my heart. Around us for gladness the bluebells were ringing. Ah, then little thought I how soon we should part. Still glows the bright sunshine o'er valley and mountain, still warbles the blackbird his note from the tree, still trembles the moonbeam on streamlet and fountain. But what are the beauties of nature to me? With sorrow, deep sorrow, my bosom is laden. All day I go mourning in search of my love. Ye echoes, oh, tell me where is the sweet maiden? She sleeps 'neath the green turf down by the ash grove.
Beautiful, thank you. I close with words from Carl Sandburg, another favorite poem of Kay's. Gather the stars if you wish it so. Gather the songs and keep them. Gather the faces of women. Gather for keeping years and years. And then loosen your hands, let go, and say goodbye. Let go the stars and songs, let go the faces and years. Loosen your hands and say goodbye. May we all now, as we say our farewell to Kay's physical presence, rest our hands upon our hearts and know that she remains there. Her light, her love, her joy, her essence. And with our hands so loosened, let us share all that with a world so deeply in need. Blessed be, and amen. Right. And be, the postlude remains.